Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. Marshall English stood at the kitchen counter, watching through the window as his 6-year-old daughter Emma played in the backyard. The Saturday afternoon light caught the auburn highlights in her hair, the same shade as her mother's. He smiled, remembering how Shauna had looked that morning, still sleepy-eyed as she'd left for her nursing shift at County General. "More coffee, Marshall." Lenora Haynes appeared beside him, the silver carafe already tilting toward his mug. "I'm good, thanks." He moved slightly away, a reflexive gesture he'd perfected over the past year since Shauna's mother had moved from Ohio to live in the guest house behind their property. Lenora meant well, or so everyone insisted, but her presence felt like a hand constantly adjusting the temperature in his own home. "Emma's hair is getting so long," Lenora observed, her tone light but pointed. "I should braid it before dinner. Keep it neat." Marshall watched his daughter chase a butterfly across the grass, her laughter carrying through the glass. "She likes it down on weekends. Children don't always know what's best for them." Lenora's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Structure, Marshall. That's what builds character." He'd heard variations of this lecture before. Lenora had raised Shauna as a single mother after her husband died in a construction accident when Shauna was 3. She'd worked 2 jobs, kept an immaculate house, and molded her daughter into a responsible, successful woman. Shauna adored her mother, credited her with everything good in her life. Marshall had learned early that questioning Lenora's methods was the fastest way to start an argument. "I'll go check on Emma," he said, heading for the door. "Dinner's at 6. Don't let her get too dirty." Outside, Emma's face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy, look." She held out her cupped hands, revealing a ladybug. Marshall crouched beside her, examining the insect with exaggerated interest. "That's a good luck charm right there. Can I keep it? Better let it go find its family. But we can look for more together." They spent the next hour exploring the garden, Emma chattering about her week at school, her best friend Riley's birthday party, the book they were reading in class. These were Marshall's favorite moments, just the two of them, no schedules or expectations, just a father and daughter existing in their own world. As the sun lowered, Lenora called them in. "Emma, time to clean up." The change in his daughter was subtle but immediate. Her shoulders tensed. The light in her eyes dimmed slightly. "Come on, butterfly," Marshall said, taking her hand. "Let's get washed up." Inside, Lenora had set the dining table with her usual precision. She'd insisted on cooking tonight, pot roast with vegetables, one of Shauna's childhood favorites. Marshall had to admit she was an excellent cook, though the meals always came with an undercurrent of obligation, as if they should be grateful not just for the food, but for her sacrifice in preparing it. "Emma, come here," Lenora said after dinner. "Let me fix your hair before your mother gets home. You look like a wild thing." Emma hesitated, glancing at Marshall. "Mom, she's fine," he started. "It'll only take a minute." Lenora's voice had that edge he'd learned to recognize, the one that said resistance would be noted and remembered. Emma slowly walked to her grandmother. Lenora's hands moved through her hair with quick, practiced efficiency. Marshall watched from the doorway as his daughter sat rigidly, her small hands gripping the chair's seat. "There," Lenora announced, finishing an elaborate French braid. "Much better. A young lady should look presentable." Emma mumbled a thank you and hurried past Marshall toward her room. He found her 20 minutes later, sitting on her bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Hey, Bug, you okay?" She nodded, but wouldn't meet his eyes. "Emma, I'm fine, Daddy." Her voice was small. He sat beside her, not pushing, just being present. After a moment, she leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. She stiffened, pulling away slightly. "What's wrong?" Concern sharpened his voice. "Nothing," but there were tears forming in her eyes. Marshall's heart began to pound. "Did you hurt yourself?" She shook her head, lower lip trembling. "Emma." He turned her gently to face him. "Talk to me." "I'm not supposed to tell," she whispered. The words sent ice through his veins. "You could tell me anything. Always. You know that, right?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "But Grandma said." "Grandma's not here right now. It's just us." He kept his voice calm despite the alarm bells screaming in his head. "Whatever it is, I need to know." Emma's small hands twisted the rabbit's ears. Sometimes, when she braids my hair, if I move or cry, The words caught in her throat. Marshall waited, forcing himself to breathe. She hits me, Emma finally whispered. On my back. She says the marks don't show there, and Mommy won't see, and if I tell anyone, it means I'm bad and deserve worse. The world tilted. Marshall heard the words, understood them intellectually, but his mind rejected the reality they represented. Show me, he said, his voice barely audible. With trembling hands, Emma lifted her shirt. Her back was a canvas of bruises in various stages of healing. Purple, green, yellow. Some were clearly handprints. Others looked like they'd been made with something solid. The pattern was deliberate, methodical, kept carefully below the shoulder line where a t-shirt would hide them. Marshall's vision swam. A sound escaped his throat that he didn't recognize, something between a sob and a growl. His hand shook as he gently lowered Emma's shirt. How long, he managed. Since Grandma moved here. She says it's discipline. I need to learn to behave properly, like Mommy did. That Mommy turned out perfect because Grandma knew how to correct her. The implications crashed over him. Shauna, his wife, who flinched at unexpected touches, who was always apologizing, who had panic attacks about making mistakes, who seemed to need her mother's approval for every decision despite being a 32-year-old woman with her own family. Jesus Christ. Does Mommy know? Emma shook her head frantically. Grandma said I can never tell Mommy. That would hurt her feelings. That Mommy loves Grandma more than anyone. And if I made Mommy mad at Grandma, Mommy wouldn't love me anymore. Marshall pulled his daughter close, careful of her back, his mind already racing. Listen to me, Emma. None of this is your fault. Not one bit. What Grandma did is wrong. Very wrong. And you did exactly right by telling me. Am I going to get in trouble? No, baby. Never. I promise you. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. I need you to be brave a little longer, okay? Can you do that for me? She nodded against his chest. Good girl. Now, I need to take some pictures of your back. Just so we have a record. Is that okay? Another nod. With his phone, Marshall documented every bruise, every mark, every piece of evidence of what had been done to his child. His hands were steady now, the initial shock crystallizing into something cold and focused. He'd been a documentary filmmaker before Emma was born, had spent years investigating stories that people wanted hidden. He knew how to build a case. He knew how to find the truth. And he knew that what he was looking at wasn't just abuse. It was systematic, calculated. This was a woman who'd perfected her technique over decades, starting with her own daughter. Daddy. Emma's voice was tiny. What are you going to do? Marshall looked at his daughter. This small, innocent person who should have been safe in her own home, who'd been betrayed by someone meant to love her. He thought of his wife, who'd probably endured the same or worse, who'd been so conditioned that she'd unknowingly allowed the cycle to continue. He thought of Lenora Haynes, sitting in the guest house right now, probably congratulating herself on another successful correction. I'm going to fix this, he said. I'm going to make sure you're safe and that this never happens again. To you or anyone else. Ow! Marshall's mind was already working, pieces clicking into place. He needed to be smart about this. Lenora had spent a lifetime building her image as the devoted grandmother, the martyred mother who'd sacrificed everything. Shauna would be his first obstacle. Her love for her mother ran deep, rooted in years of manipulation and conditioning. He'd need proof, not just for the authorities, but to break through 30 years of psychological control. I'm going to tell the truth, he said simply. But first, I need to make sure people will listen. Emma's arms tightened around him. I'm scared. I know, Bug, but you don't have to be. Because now Daddy knows. And nothing is more important to me than keeping you safe. Through the window, Marshall could see lights on in the guest house. Lenora would be settling in for the evening, probably reviewing her needlework or watching one of her programs, secure in the belief that her secret was safe. She had no idea that everything was about to change. Marshall held his daughter until she fell asleep, then carried her to bed. He sat in the hallway outside her room, phone in hand, staring at the photos. Part of him wanted to storm into the guest house right now, to confront Lenora, to make her pay immediately for what she'd done. But that would be playing into her hands. Lenora thrived on emotional reactions, on being the victim, on manipulating situations to her advantage. No, this required strategy. Planning. He needed to document everything, build an unassailable case, and most critically, he needed to prepare Shauna for what was coming. His wife arrived home at 9:30, exhausted from her shift. Marshall met her at the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Hey, babe," Shauna said, dropping her bag and kissing his cheek. "How was your day?" "Mom said she made pot roast." "It was fine. Emma's asleep." He watched her face, seeing her now through a new lens. The way she automatically checked her appearance in the hall mirror, adjusting her hair. The slight tension in her shoulders. The quick scan of the room to ensure everything was in order. "Shauna, we need to talk." "Oh God, what did I forget?" Her hand went to her mouth, anxiety flooding her features. "Was I supposed to?" "No, nothing like that. You didn't forget anything. He took a breath. "It's about your mom." "And Emma." Shauna's face shuddered immediately. "What about them?" "Let's sit down." They sat at the kitchen table. Marshall chose his words carefully. "When was the last time you saw Emma's back?" "Her back? What are you talking about?" "Just answer the question." Shauna frowned. "I don't know, Marshall." "What?" "Because Emma told me something today. Something I need you to see before we discuss it." He pulled out his phone, opening the photos. "I need you to look at these, and I need you to stay calm." He turned the screen toward her. The color drained from Shauna's face. Her hand flew to her mouth. No. When did this happen? Did she fall? Did someone at school?" "Your mother did this." Silence. Shauna stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "That's not. You're wrong. You have to be wrong. Mom would never." "Emma told me. In detail. It's been happening since Lenora moved here. Every time she braids her hair, if Emma moves or makes a sound, your mother hits her. On her back, where the marks won't show. And she threatened Emma not to tell anyone, especially you." Shauna's hands were shaking. "You're lying. Why would you lie about this?" "I'm not lying, and you know it." Marshall's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at those bruises, Shauna. Look at the pattern. That's not from falling. That's from repeated, deliberate strikes. And I think," he paused, knowing this next part would be the hardest, "I think she did the same thing to you." His wife's reaction confirmed everything. Her face went white, then red. Her breathing became shallow. Her hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare." "Shauna, my mother raised me. She sacrificed everything for me. She worked herself to the bone to give me a good life. She loved me. She still loves me." Shauna's voice rose with each word, taking on a desperate edge. "She wouldn't. She would never hurt Emma. You're wrong. You have to be wrong, because if you're not..." Tears streamed down her face now. "If you're not, then everything I believed about my childhood, about my mother, about who I am..." "I know." Marshall reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I know this is devastating. I know it changes everything. But Shauna, our daughter has been suffering in silence because she was afraid of losing your love. Just like you probably suffered and stayed silent because you were afraid of losing your mother's love." Shauna stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "I need to talk to my mother." "Not yet. Please." Marshall stood too, blocking her path to the door. "I know you want answers. But Shauna, listen to me. Your mother is smart. She's been doing this for decades. If you confront her now, emotionally, without a plan, she'll manipulate the situation. She'll make you doubt what you know to be true. She'll make Emma feel like she's the one who did something wrong. Then what do you suggest?" Shauna's voice was icy. "Because that's my mother out there, and that's my daughter upstairs. And you're asking me to believe one of them is lying. I'm not asking you to believe anything except what your own eyes can see. Those bruises are real. Emma's fear is real. And deep down, Shauna, you know this rings true. You know your mother has always been controlling. You know there were things about your childhood that weren't right, even if you've spent years making excuses for them." Shauna's face crumpled. She sank into a chair, head in her hands. "She used to lock me in the closet. When I was bad, sometimes for hours. She said it was the only way I'd learn. I told myself it was normal discipline, that all parents did things like that, but..." A sob escaped her. "God, Marshall, what if you're right? What if I let this happen to Emma because I was too damaged to see it? Marshall knelt beside her, taking her hands. This isn't on you. You didn't know. You were conditioned from childhood not to see it, not to question it. That's what abusers do. They make you complicit in your own abuse. But now we know, and now we can stop it. How? If what you're saying is true, she's been getting away with this my whole life. She's good at hiding it. She's good at making people believe she's this wonderful, devoted mother and grandmother. Who's going to believe us? Everyone. Because we're not going to give them a choice. Marshall's expression hardened. I'm going to make sure there's so much evidence, so much truth exposed that she can't wriggle out of it. But I need time, and I need you with me, not against me. Shauna looked at her husband, really looked at him. Marshall had always been the steady one, the thinker, the one who approached problems methodically. He'd given up his filmmaking career to be a stay-at-home dad when Emma was born, content to write freelance articles while Shauna pursued her nursing degree. She'd sometimes wondered if he resented the sacrifice. But looking at him now, she saw only fierce determination and love for their daughter. "What do you need me to do?" she asked quietly. "First, I need you to act normal around your mother. I know that's going to be almost impossible, but it's crucial. We can't let her know we're onto her. You want me to pretend everything's fine while Shauna couldn't finish the sentence. Just for a few days. In the meantime, Emma doesn't go near her unsupervised. Not for 1 second. I'll handle that part. You just need to keep your mother from suspecting anything. And then I'm going to expose exactly who Lenora Haynes really is. Not just to the police, but to everyone. Her friends, her church group, the community. I'm going to strip away every mask she's ever worn." Shauna wiped her eyes. "My mother is very good at playing the victim. She'll turn this around somehow. She always does. Not this time." Marshall's voice carried a cold certainty. "Because this time, I'm going to make sure the truth is so loud, so documented, so undeniable that she can't spin her way out of it. She hurt my daughter, Shauna. She hurt you. And people like her? They don't stop until someone makes them stop. This is going to destroy our family." "No," Marshall said firmly. "Your mother already did that. We're just going to rebuild it without her poison in the foundation." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a shroud. Outside, the guest house lights were still on. Inside it, Lenora Haynes probably slept soundly, confident in her control, in her ability to shape her daughter's family according to her twisted vision. She had no idea that the man she dismissed as weak, the son-in-law she'd barely tolerated, was about to become her worst nightmare. Marshall looked at his wife's tear-stained face and made a silent promise. He would protect his family. He would expose the truth. And he would make sure that Lenora Haynes faced consequences for every moment of suffering she'd inflicted. The game had begun, and Marshall English intended to win. The next morning, Marshall woke before dawn, his mind already cataloging the steps ahead. Beside him, Shauna hadn't slept. He'd felt her restlessness throughout the night, the occasional sob she tried to muffle in her pillow. He didn't push her talk. Some revelations needed time to settle, to be absorbed before they could be processed. He made coffee, strong and black, and was sitting at his laptop when Emma appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dragging behind her. "Morning, Bug," he said softly. "You're up early." She climbed into his lap, fitting herself against him like she used to when she was smaller. "I had bad dreams. About Grandma?" A knot against his chest. "She's not going to hurt you anymore. I promise. But she lives here, right outside." Marshall had been thinking about that all night. Not for much longer. "But until then, you stick close to me or Mommy, okay? You don't go near the guest house, and you don't go anywhere alone with Grandma. If she asks, you tell her you don't feel well, or you have homework, or you make up any excuse you want. Can you do that? Will she be mad? Probably. But her being mad is not your problem anymore. That's for the grown-ups to handle." Emma looked up at him. "Daddy, why did Grandma hurt me? What did I do wrong?" Marshall's throat tightened. "Nothing, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Some people are just broken inside. They hurt others because something in them is damaged. It doesn't make sense, and it's not fair, but it's not because of anything you did or didn't do. Did I make her broken? No. She was broken long before you were born. And that's very sad for her, but it doesn't give her the right to hurt you. Shauna appeared then, looking hollowed out but determined. She saw Emma in Marshall's lap and her expression softened. Morning, sweetie. Mommy, are you mad at me? Shauna's face crumpled, but she held it together. Oh, baby, no. Never. Come here. Emma climbed into her mother's arms, and Shauna held her daughter like she'd never let go. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. That's my job, and I failed. Shauna, Marshall said gently. Don't. But I should have seen. She didn't let you see. That was her intention. Stop blaming yourself and focus on what we do now. The doorbell rang. Marshall checked his watch, 7 a.m. on a Sunday. Through the window, he saw Lenora standing on the porch, holding a casserole dish. It's her, Emma whispered, shrinking against Shauna. I got it, Marshall said, standing. You two go upstairs. He opened the door with a neutral expression. Lenora, early morning. I made breakfast casserole. Thought we could have a nice family meal before church. Her eyes scanned past him, looking for Shauna and Emma. Where are my girls? Still sleeping. It's only 7. Well, they should be up. The early bird catches the worm, as they say. She moved a step inside, but Marshall blocked her path. Actually, this isn't a good time. Lenora's smile flickered. I'm sorry. Emma's not feeling well. Stomach bug. Shauna's up with her. We're going to skip church today. A stomach bug? I should check on her. I have ginger tea that works wonders. That's not necessary. We got it handled. Marshall kept his voice pleasant but firm. Thanks for the casserole. I'll make sure it doesn't go to waste. He took the dish from her hands and moved to close the door. Lenora's hand shot out, stopping it. Marshall, is something wrong? Her tone had shifted, taking on that wounded quality he'd heard her use with Shauna countless times. You're being very cold with me. Not at all. Just trying to keep the house quiet so Shauna and Emma can rest. I'd like to see my daughter. She'll call you later. Marshall English, I've lived here for a year. I've never been barred from this house. What exactly is going on? This was the moment. Marshall could feel the weight of it, the fork in the road. He could back down, let her in, continue the pretense. Or he could plant the first seed of her unraveling. You tell me, Lenora, is there any reason you can think of why we might need some space from you right now? Her eyes narrowed. I have no idea what you're implying. Then I guess it's not important. Enjoy your Sunday. He closed the door firmly, throwing the deadbolt for good measure. Through the window, he watched Lenora stand on the porch for a long moment, her expression calculating. Then she turned and walked back to the guest house, her posture rigid with barely contained fury. Upstairs, Shauna was drying Emma's tears. She knows something's wrong, Marshall said. We got to move faster than I thought. What's the plan? Marshall pulled out a notebook where he'd been listing everything since before dawn. First, I need to take Emma to a doctor. Someone outside Lenora's influence who can document these injuries officially. Do you know anyone at County General you trust completely? Shauna thought. Dr. Reynolds. She's in pediatrics. We've worked together for years. She's thorough and she doesn't take any shit. Call her. See if she can see Emma today, even if it means going to her house. Tell her it's an emergency, but don't give details over the phone. Okay, what else? I'm going to talk to some people from my old life. Investigators, journalists. See what they can dig up on your mother's past. If she did this to you, and now Emma, I'm willing to bet there are other victims we don't know about. You think there are others? People like Lenora don't suddenly start abusing at age 40. This is a pattern that goes back decades. I want to find anyone else she's hurt, anyone who might be willing to testify or share their story. Shauna's hands clenched. My father. He died when I was 3. Everyone always said it was an accident at the construction site, but what? But my mother got a huge settlement. Enough that she never really had to work 2 jobs like she always claimed. She chose to. She wanted everyone to see her as the struggling single mother, the martyr. And Dad's death was ruled accidental. But I remember hearing whispers at his funeral. People who seemed to think something wasn't right about it. Marshall felt a chill run down his spine. You think she had something to do with it? I don't know. I was so young. But Marshall, if she's capable of systematically abusing children, What else might she be capable of? Then we dig there too. What was your father's name? Roger Haynes. He died in 1997, fell from scaffolding on a high-rise project in Columbus. The company he worked for shut down a few years later, but there might still be records. Marshall added it to his growing list. Anything else you can remember? Anything unusual from your childhood? People who suddenly disappeared from your life? Family members who stopped visiting? Shauna closed her eyes, thinking back. My Aunt Patricia, my dad's sister. She came around a lot after he died, tried to help Mom. But then suddenly she was gone. Mom said she'd moved away, but I remember her at the funeral, crying, saying something about knowing the truth. I always thought she meant about missing Dad, but I'll try to track her down. What's her last name now? I don't know. We lost touch completely. But her married name back then was Patricia Mercer. Got it. Marshall was already opening his laptop, pulling up databases he still had access to from his investigative days. This is good, Shauna. Every thread we can pull helps. Emma had been quiet during this exchange, sitting on her mother's lap with wide eyes. Are you going to tell everyone what Grandma did? Yes, Marshall said simply. Everyone who needs to know. Will people believe you? They will when I'm done. Because I'm not just going to tell them, Bug. I'm going to show them. With evidence they can't deny. Shauna's phone buzzed. It's Mom. She's texting asking if Emma's okay. If we need anything. Don't answer yet. Let her stew a bit. Marshall, she'll just show up again. Then we deal with it. But every interaction from now on, I want recorded. Your phone has that feature, right? Yes, but is that legal? In this state, we're a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. So yes, from now on, every conversation with Lenora gets documented. Dr. Reynolds agreed to see Emma at her home that afternoon. Marshall drove, taking a circuitous route to make sure they weren't followed, a precaution that felt paranoid until he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Lenora's car pulling out of the driveway behind them. Shit, he muttered. What? Shauna turned. Your mother's following us. Shauna looked back, then faced forward again, her jaw tight. What do? We stick to the plan. She doesn't know where we're going. Marshall took several random turns, eventually losing Lenora's sedan in a busy shopping center parking lot. Okay, we're clear. Dr. Reynolds' home was a modest ranch in a quiet suburb. She met them at the door, her professional demeanor already in place despite the Sunday afternoon setting. Shauna, she said warmly, then looked at Marshall and Emma. You must be Marshall and Emma. Come in. Inside, she'd set up a small examination area in her home office. Emma, honey, your mom told me you have some hurts that need looking at. Is it okay if I examine you? Emma looked at Marshall, who nodded encouragingly. Dr. Reynolds is here to help. She's going to make sure you're okay, and she's going to write down what she sees so we have a record. Is that all right? It won't hurt. Not at all, Dr. Reynolds assured her. I just need to look and take some pictures just like your dad did. Then we'll have a little chat about how you're feeling. The examination took 20 minutes. Marshall watched Dr. Reynolds' expression grow increasingly grim as she documented each bruise, each mark. She asked Emma gentle questions about how each injury occurred, when, where, and took copious notes. Finally, she stepped out of the room with Marshall and Shauna, leaving Emma with a tablet and headphones. These are classic non-accidental injuries, she said without preamble. The pattern, the location, the various stages of healing. This is systematic abuse. I need to file a mandatory report with Child Protective Services. We expected that, Marshall said. In fact, we're counting on it. Good. Because whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The bruises are positioned to remain hidden. The force used was calibrated. Painful, but unlikely to cause permanent physical damage. This is someone with experience. It's my mother, Shauna said, her voice hollow. She's been living in our guest house. Dr. Reynolds looked shocked. Lenora? But she seems so. I know, Shauna cut her off. Everyone thinks she's wonderful. That's how she's gotten away with it for so long. Did she do this to you too? Dr. Reynolds asked carefully. Shauna nodded, tears spilling over. And probably others before me. Then we need to document everything. Shauna, I know this is hard, but would you be willing to make a formal statement? and possibly undergo an examination yourself to see if there's any lasting physical evidence. Whatever it takes. Marshall squeezed his wife's hand. We're building a case. Not just for Emma, but for everyone Lenora's hurt. We want her prosecuted to the fullest extent. I'll do everything I can to help, Dr. Reynolds said. But Marshall, Shauna, you need to know, CPS investigations can take time. And in cases involving family members, especially grandparents, the courts are sometimes reluctant to act decisively without overwhelming evidence. Then we'll give them overwhelming evidence, Marshall said. By the time I'm done, there won't be any doubt about what she is. That evening, after Emma was asleep and Shauna had gone to lie down with a headache that Marshall suspected was actually suppressed screaming, he sat in his office and made a phone call he'd been dreading. Rico? It's Marshall English. English? Damn, man, it's been what, 5 years? How's civilian life treating you? Rosario Rico Sweeney had been Marshall's cameraman and closest friend during his documentary filmmaking days. Together, they'd exposed corruption, abuse, and injustice across 3 states. Rico had gone on to work for a major investigative news outlet, while Marshall had settled into domesticity. Not great at the moment, Marshall said. I need your help with something. Personal, but it could be a story too. I'm listening. Marshall laid it out, everything. Emma's abuse, Shauna's revelation about her own childhood, the suspicions about Lenora's past. Rico listened in silence, his breathing the only sound on the line. Jesus, he finally said. Your own family. Man, I'm sorry. I don't need sympathy. I need an investigator. Someone who can dig into Lenora Haynes' past and find out who else she's hurt. And I need it done quietly before she figures out what we're doing. Consider it done. Send me everything you have. Dates, locations, names. I'll start pulling threads. Thanks, Rico. I owe you. No, you don't. This is what we do, remember? Shine light on the roaches. Speaking of which, you thought about documenting this yourself? Marshall had been thinking about little else. His documentary instincts were screaming at him to film everything, to create an unimpeachable video record. But this was his family, his daughter's trauma. Could he really point a camera at it? I'm conflicted, he admitted. Don't be. You know as well as I do that video evidence is king. And if this woman is as manipulative as you say, having her own words and actions on film could be the thing that seals her fate. Plus, Rico added, his tone gentling, Emma might want that record someday. Proof that she told the truth, that her experience was real and documented. I'll think about it. Think fast. Women like this, once they sense they're cornered, they escalate. You've got a narrow window before she makes a move. As if on cue, Marshall heard a knock at the front door. He glanced at the clock. 10 p.m. Through the window, he saw Lenora's silhouette. Rico, I gotta go. Call me when you have something. Marshall opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Lenora, it's late. We need to talk. Her expression was hard, all pretense of grandmotherly warmth abandoned. What's going on, Marshall? Shauna won't answer my calls. Emma's supposedly sick, but I saw you all leaving in the car, and you've been acting strange. Have I? Don't play games with me. I know something's wrong. Is it Shauna? Is she leaving you? Because if she is, I told her years ago you weren't right for her. Stop. Marshall's voice cut through her building tirade. This isn't about Shauna and me. It's about you. Me? What about me? When's the last time you hit my daughter? The change in Lenora was instant. The mask of concern vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. What did that little brat tell you? Marshall kept his expression neutral, even as rage surged through him. You just answered my question. Emma is a difficult child. She needs firm guidance. She's 6 years old, and you've been beating her. I've been disciplining her, just like I disciplined Shauna. Look how well she turned out. You mean look how damaged she is? How she flinches at loud noises, apologizes constantly, has anxiety attacks. Lenora's eyes narrowed. Shauna is successful, respectful, responsible, because I taught her how to behave properly. You, on the other hand, have been spoiling Emma, letting her run wild. I want you out of the guest house. Tomorrow. Silence. Then Lenora laughed, a harsh sound. You can't kick me out. This is Shauna's property too, and she would never. Try me. I'll talk to my daughter. She'll see reason. She always does. You're not talking to Shauna or Emma. Not without supervision. Not until this is resolved. Resolved? There's nothing to resolve. Emma is a child telling tales because she doesn't want to mind her grandmother. Children lie. Marshall, surely you know that. Not like this. Not with evidence to back it up. Lenora went still. Evidence. Bruises. Photographs. Medical documentation. And before you try to spin this as accidental injuries or normal childhood bumps, Dr. Reynolds has already filed a report with CPS. They'll be contacting you soon. You called CPS on me? Lenora's voice rose. How dare you? After everything I've done for this family. I gave up my life in Ohio to help you raise that child. I cook, I clean, I provide stability. You abuse my daughter. And now it's coming to light. Lenora's expression shifted again, this time to something that made Marshall's skin crawl. Pure cold rage. You have no idea what you've done. Shauna will never forgive you for this. You're turning her against her own mother. You're destroying this family. You destroyed it the moment you laid hands on Emma. I should have known you'd be a problem. You always were too soft, too permissive. Shauna needed a man who would support proper discipline, not some failed filmmaker playing house husband. Get off my property. Now, this is Shauna's property too. I have rights. Then we'll let the courts decide about your rights. But tonight, right now, you're leaving. Lenora stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think you're protecting your family? You're tearing it apart. Shauna loves me. She needs me. Without me, she falls apart. And when she does, when she realizes what you've done, she'll choose me. She always chooses me. We'll see. Marshall stepped back and closed the door in her face. He watched through the window as Lenora stood on the porch for several minutes, her hands clenched into fists. Finally, she turned and walked back to the guest house, her posture radiating fury. Marshall's phone was already out, texting Rico. Need security cameras installed tomorrow. And possibly a restraining order. Then he went upstairs to check on Emma, who was sleeping fitfully, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. He adjusted her blankets, kissed her forehead, and made another silent promise. This was just the beginning. Lenora had built her kingdom of control over decades, perfecting her techniques, grooming her victims. But Marshall had torn down powerful people before, exposed corruption and abuse that seemed untouchable. He could be patient. He could be thorough. And when he was done, Lenora Haynes would have nowhere left to hide. The war had started, and Marshall intended to fight it on every front. By Monday morning, Rico had pulled up preliminary information on Lenora Haynes that made Marshall's blood run cold. He sat in his office, door locked, reading through the file that had been emailed at 6 a.m. Lenora May Haynes, née Whitmore, born 1964 in rural Kentucky. Father, Calvin Whitmore, coal miner, died in mine collapse 1972. Mother, Susan Whitmore, no record of employment, died 1998. Causes listed as natural, but medical examiner noted signs of prolonged malnutrition and possible neglect. Lenora married Roger Haynes in 1986. Roger died in 1997, fell from scaffolding at construction site. OSHA investigation found safety violations but ruled death accidental. Settlement to widow, $375,000. Life insurance payout, $150,000. Lenora had taken out additional policy on Roger 6 months before his death, which raised flags but insufficient evidence for insurance fraud investigation. 2 complaints filed with Kentucky Child Services regarding Lenora's treatment of daughter Shauna, both in 1995, child age 8. Complaints filed by 1. Patricia Mercer, sister-in-law, 2. Denise Foster, neighbor. Both investigations closed due to insufficient evidence and Shauna's reluctance to confirm abuse. Notes indicate child seemed coached and fearful of contradicting mother. Patricia Mercer moved to Arizona shortly after filing complaint. Interviewed by local authorities at Lenora's request, claimed harassment by Lenora. Filed restraining order 1996, which was granted. No contact since. Marshall's hand shook. There was the pattern going back decades. Rico had attached contact information for Patricia Mercer, now Patricia Holden, living in Phoenix. He picked up his phone and dialed before he could overthink it. A cautious woman's voice answered. Hello, Mrs. Holden. My name is Marshall English. I'm married to Shauna Haynes, Roger Haynes' daughter. A sharp intake of breath. Is Shauna all right? We've had some revelations come to light about her mother. Lenora, I was hoping you might be willing to talk to me about why you filed that CPS complaint in 1995. Silence stretched out. Then, has she hurt the grandchildren? The fact that Patricia's first question assumed abuse told Marshall everything. Yes, my daughter Emma. Oh God, I try to warn people. I try to stop her. But Lenora is very, very good at making people believe her lies. And Shauna was so conditioned, even at 8 years old, to defend her mother. The investigators saw a scared little girl who wouldn't confirm the abuse, and they saw a tearful widow working hard to raise her daughter alone. They chose the narrative that felt more comfortable. Mrs. Holden, I'm building a case against Lenora. I have documentation of Emma's injuries, and my wife is starting to remember her own abuse. But I need more. I need other voices, other victims. Would you be willing to go on record about what you saw? What I saw. Patricia's voice thickened with emotion. I saw my brother's wife kill him. Marshall sat up straighter. Explain. Roger was terrified of heights. He told me that since we were kids. When he took that construction job, it was supposed to be ground-level work, equipment operation. He never should have been on scaffolding 30 feet up. But Lenora had been pushing him to make more money, take on extra shifts, go for higher-paying positions. The week before he died, he told me she'd been suggesting he could make double if he worked the high-rise projects. That's circumstantial. It is. But here's what's not. The foreman on that job told me, at Roger's funeral, that someone had called the site manager the day before the accident, claiming to be Roger's wife, saying he'd been bragging about his fearlessness with heights and asking if there were opportunities on the high floors. The foreman thought it was odd because Roger had always been honest about his acrophobia. But the site was short-staffed, so they put him up there. And the next day, the safety harness, the one piece of equipment that would have saved him, was found to have been tampered with. Cut halfway through. Jesus. Did they investigate? Barely. The company didn't want liability, so they paid out the settlement and buried it. And Lenora played the grieving widow so well. She cried at all the right times, said all the right things. By the time I tried to speak up, she'd already painted me as a troublemaker, the bitter sister-in-law who was jealous of the settlement money. What about Shauna? What did you see her do to Shauna? Patricia's breath hitched. She kept that little girl terrified. I'd come over and find Shauna locked in closets, standing in corners for hours, forced to sleep on the floor if she'd misbehaved. The things Lenora considered misbehavior were insane. Normal childhood things like laughing too loud or tracking dirt inside. And the hitting, I saw bruises on that child's back, her upper arms, her thighs. Always places that could be hidden. When I asked Shauna about them, she'd parrot what Lenora told her. Mommy's helping me learn to be good. Marshall closed his eyes. Why didn't you take Shauna when you filed the complaint? I tried. I begged CPS to remove her from that home. But Lenora was so convincing. She showed them the neat house, the full refrigerator, Shauna's good grades. She cried and talked about how hard she worked, how much she loved her daughter. And Shauna, bless her heart, was too scared to contradict any of it. She'd been trained from birth to back up her mother's lies. Would you testify to all of this? In court, if it comes to that. Absolutely. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to finally hold that woman accountable. What do you need from me? Marshall felt a surge of hope. I need a formal statement, in writing, detailing everything you witnessed. I need you to contact CPS in our state and report what you know. And I need you to be prepared for Lenora to come after you the way she did before. Let her try. I'm not afraid of her anymore. And maybe I can finally make up for not doing more to save Shauna. After they hung up, Marshall sat with the weight of it all. Roger Haynes, possibly murdered. Shauna, systematically abused. Patricia, driven away. And now Emma, the latest victim in a cycle of violence that stretched back decades. His phone rang. Rico, I've got more, his friend said without preamble. Lenora worked at a daycare in Ohio from 2000 to 2003. It shut down after multiple complaints of children being injured. Nothing was ever proven, but I talked to the former owner. She fired Lenora after walking in on her zip-tying a 3-year-old's hands together because he wouldn't stop touching toys during nap time. Christ. There's also a woman named Ophelia Harper who lived next door to Lenora in Columbus from 1998 to 2005. She reported Lenora to the police 3 times for suspected child abuse. Different children, visitors, relatives who'd stay with Lenora. Each time, nothing came of it. But Harper kept a journal. She's willing to share it. How many victims are we looking at? Hard to say. But Marshall, this woman is a serial abuser. She's been doing this for most of her adult life. She's got very, very good at hiding it and discrediting anyone who tried to speak up. Marshall thanked Rico and added the new information to his growing file. He was building a timeline, a pattern, a comprehensive picture of Lenora's predation. But even as the evidence mounted, he knew the hardest battle would be the one happening under his own roof. Shauna had called in sick to work, something she never did. She'd spent most of Sunday night in Emma's room, holding their daughter, crying quietly. Now she was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee like it held answers. I remembered something, she said when Marshall joined her. When I was 9, there was a little boy, Devin, I think his name was, son of one of Mom's friends. He stayed with us for a weekend while his mother was in the hospital. I remember hearing him crying in the night. The next morning, he had a black eye. Mom said he'd fallen in the bathroom, but Shauna's voice broke. He was so scared of her, Marshall, and I did nothing. I was too afraid to say anything. You were 9 years old and being abused yourself. That's not on you. I should have protected him, just like I should have protected Emma. Stop. Marshall took her hands. Listen to me. You were a child, and then you were an adult who'd been conditioned from birth to believe your mother's abuse was normal. Lenora spent your entire life making sure you couldn't see her clearly. That's what abusers do. They warp your reality until you can't trust your own perceptions. I let her move into our guest house. I let her around Emma unsupervised. I practically served my daughter to her on a platter. You thought you were doing something good, letting your mother be close to her granddaughter, giving Emma family connections. You had no way of knowing what she really was because she made sure you couldn't see it. Shauna looked at him, tears streaming. When do I get to stop being her victim and start being Emma's protector? Right now. Today. Because we're going to end this. Together. There was a knock at the door. Through the window, Marshall saw a woman in a business suit, CPS, right on schedule. He'd been expecting them since Dr. Reynolds filed her report. The caseworker, who introduced herself as Diana Reeves, was professional but clearly skeptical. She'd probably seen too many custody battles dressed up as abuse allegations, too many parents weaponizing CPS against each other. We need to speak with Emma, she said after introductions. Alone, if that's all right. Of course, Marshall said, though every instinct screamed against letting his daughter out of his sight. She's in her room. They waited in tense silence while Reeves interviewed Emma. 30 minutes felt like hours. When she emerged, her expression had changed. The skepticism replaced by grim determination. I'd like to see the guest house where Mrs. Haynes has been living, she said. Lenora answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Reeves, what a surprise. Won't you come in? Marshall and Shauna followed the caseworker inside. The guest house was immaculate, as always. Everything in its place, decorated with family photos and religious iconography. It looked like the home of a devoted grandmother. Until Reeves opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a wooden ruler, its edge stained dark. What's this for? She asked calmly. Arts and crafts, Lenora said smoothly. I help Emma with school projects. Reeves set it aside and continued her search. In the bedroom closet, she found a leather belt with a heavy buckle. In the bathroom, a wooden hairbrush with an unusually thick handle. In the kitchen, a long metal spoon. You seem to have a lot of implements that could be used for corporal punishment, Reeves observed. I'm old-fashioned. I believe in discipline. Lenora's mask was starting to crack. There's nothing wrong with teaching children consequences. There's a difference between discipline and abuse, Mrs. Haynes. I've never abused anyone. Lenora's voice rose. I raised my daughter to be a successful, productive member of society. Ask her. Ask Shauna if I was a bad mother. All eyes turned to Shauna. This was the moment. The choice between the mother who'd raised her and the daughter who needed protecting. Shauna's voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. You locked me in closets for hours. You hit me with belts, spoons, rulers, anything you could reach. You told me I was bad, that I deserved pain, that you were the only one who would ever love me despite how terrible I was. You made me sleep on the floor, stand in corners until my legs gave out, go without meals as punishment. You controlled every aspect of my life until I couldn't tell the difference between your voice and my own thoughts. Lenora's face went white, then red. You ungrateful little. After everything I sacrificed for you, I worked myself to the bone. I gave up my life to raise you right. You tortured me, Shauna said, tears streaming now. And when I had my own daughter, you started torturing her too. Well, it stops now. We're not your victims anymore. You'll regret this, Lenora hissed. Both of you. You think you can turn against me? Tell these lies, ruin my reputation? I'll fight this. I'll make you both pay. Mrs. Haynes, Reeves cut in sharply. You need to stop talking. Right now. I've heard enough. She turned to Marshall and Shauna. Based on what I've seen and heard today, I'm recommending immediate removal of Mrs. Haynes from this property and a restraining order preventing contact with the minor child. I'll be referring this case to the police for criminal investigation. Lenora laughed, a wild sound. You think that will stick? I know how this works. I'll get a lawyer. I'll tell them about Marshall's hostility toward me, how he's always tried to keep me from my family. I'll tell them about Shauna's mental health issues. Yes, dear, I know about your anxiety medication, your panic attacks. They'll see an unstable mother and a manipulative father coaching a child to tell lies. I've been through this before, and I always win. You won't this time, Marshall said quietly. Because this time, there's too much evidence, too many witnesses, too many of your past victims coming forward. You're done, Lenora. The realization seemed to hit her then, the truth that her control was slipping, that the mask had finally cracked beyond repair. Her expression twisted into something ugly. You destroyed this family, she spat at Marshall. Not me. You. And Shauna will never forgive you for it. I already have forgiven him, Shauna said. For not seeing it sooner, for not protecting Emma from day one. But that's on both of us. You though? I'll never forgive you. For what you did to me, to Emma, to Dad, to everyone whose life you've poisoned. I hope you rot for it. Reeves was already on her phone, calling for police backup. Mrs. Haynes, I need you to pack a bag. You're leaving this property today. As they waited for the police, Marshall caught Lenora staring at him with pure hatred. He stared back, unflinching, letting her see that he wasn't afraid of her, that he would pursue this to whatever end it took. The game had shifted. Lenora's fortress of control was crumbling, and Marshall was just getting started with tearing it down. The police arrived within 20 minutes, 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female, both looking skeptical until Reeves brought them up to speed. Marshall provided his phone with the photographs of Emma's bruises, along with Dr. Reynolds' written report. He watched their expressions change as they reviewed the evidence. Mrs. Haynes, the female officer, whose name tag read Roman, said carefully, "We need to ask you some questions about these allegations." Lenora had regained her composure, slipping back into the role of wounded grandmother. "Of course, officer. Though I must say, I'm heartbroken that my own family would make such terrible accusations. I've devoted my life to helping raise my granddaughter, and this is how I'm repaid. Can you explain these bruises on the child?" Officer Roman showed her the photos. Children get bruises. They fall, they play rough. Emma is very active. These are pattern bruises, ma'am. They match implements found in your residence, and they're in various stages of healing, which suggests repeated incidents over time. I don't know what you want me to say. I've never laid a hand on that child in anger. Marshall stepped forward. That's a lie. Emma told us, in detail, about how you hit her during hair braiding sessions, how you threatened her to keep quiet, how you told her it was her fault, that she deserved it. Lenora's eyes flashed. The word of a 6-year-old against mine? Please. Children have vivid imaginations. They say things to get attention. I have a vivid imagination too. Shauna interrupted. Because I remember now, Mom. I remember everything you did to me. The closets, the belt, the wooden spoon you kept in the kitchen specifically for hitting me. The mind games, the isolation, the constant terror of doing something wrong. I remember all of it. You're having false memories. That therapist you saw in college probably planted them. I never saw a therapist in college, Shauna said. You wouldn't let me. You said therapy was for weak people. The male officer, Lieutenant Jacobs, had been making notes. Mrs. Haynes, we're going to need you to come to the station to make a formal statement. And based on the evidence we've seen so far, we'll be filing charges of child abuse. I want a lawyer, Lenora said immediately. That's your right. But you need to leave this property now. We'll escort you to pack your belongings. As Lenora gathered her things under police supervision, she kept up a running commentary about the injustice, the conspiracy against her, how she was the real victim. Marshall recorded every word on his phone, building his case brick by brick. Before she left, Lenora turned to Shauna one last time. You're going to regret this. When Emma grows up and realizes you kept her from her grandmother, when she learns that you chose your husband over your own mother, she'll resent you for it. Just like you'll eventually resent him. The only thing Emma will learn is that we protected her, Shauna said. That we chose her safety over your feelings. That's what real parents do. Lenora's departing look promised retribution. Marshall knew this was far from over. People like Lenora didn't go quietly. They fought, they manipulated, they burned everything down rather than accept defeat. But he was ready for it. After she left, Shauna collapsed into Marshall's arms, sobbing. Emma emerged from her room where she'd been hiding and joined the embrace. They stood there in the hallway, the three of them, holding each other while the weight of the confrontation settled over them. Is she coming back? Emma asked in a small voice. Not if I have anything to say about it, Marshall promised. That night, after Emma was finally asleep, Marshall sat down with his laptop and began organizing everything he had. The photos, the medical reports, Patricia's statement, Rico's research into Lenora's past. He created a comprehensive timeline, a narrative that showed not just one incident, but a lifetime pattern of abuse. Then he did something he'd been debating since Rico suggested it. He began editing together a documentary short. Using security footage from their house cameras, the photos of Emma's bruises, interviews with Patricia Holden, and his own narration, he created a 15-minute film that laid out Lenora's history of abuse in stark, undeniable terms. It wasn't for public consumption, yet, but it would be his insurance policy, his nuclear option if Lenora tried to manipulate her way out of consequences. Shauna found him at 3 a.m., still working. You should sleep. Can't. Too much to do. She sat beside him, looking at the screen. You're making a film about this? Documentation. Evidence. Truth. He paused. I'm sorry if this feels exploitative. It's not. Shauna touched the screen where a photo of Emma's bruised back was displayed. It's necessary. People need to see what she is, what she's done. Otherwise, she'll charm her way out of this like she has before. Rico said something similar. That video evidence is the hardest to refute. Your friend Rico sounds smart. Shauna leaned her head on Marshall's shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. When you told me about Emma, my first instinct was to defend my mother. Even after everything, even knowing what she is, part of me still. Her voice broke. That's the abuse talking. She programmed you from birth to put her needs first, to defend her, to believe her version of reality over your own experiences. Breaking that conditioning takes time. I keep waiting to feel angry at her. Properly angry, not just hurt or sad. But mostly I feel empty. Like there's this void where my mother used to be, except she was never really there in the first place. It was always just this monster wearing a mother mask. Marshall kissed the top of her head. The anger will come. When it does, don't fight it. You're entitled to rage at what she stole from you. What if Emma grows up messed up because of this? What if we've scarred her irreparably? Then we get her help. Therapy, whatever she needs. But Shauna, she's already stronger than we were at her age because she told someone. She broke the silence. That takes incredible courage. They sat together in the quiet house, watching dawn creep through the windows. Somewhere out there, Lenora was planning her counterattack. Marshall could feel it like a storm on the horizon. His phone buzzed. A text from Rico. Just got off the phone with a woman named Deborah Saunders. Says she was neighbors with Lenora in Kentucky in the early 90s. Has stories. Wants to talk. Call me. Marshall showed the text to Shauna. Another witness. The net's getting tighter. Good, Shauna said with unexpected venom. I want it so tight she can't breathe. Over the next few days, the case built momentum. CPS formally filed for emergency custody restrictions. The police interviewed Emma, Patricia, Dr. Reynolds, and several other witnesses Rico had unearthed. The prosecuting attorney, a stern woman named Conchetta Liu, seemed genuinely outraged by what she was hearing. This is one of the worst cases of systematic abuse I've seen, she told Marshall and Shauna during their meeting at her office. And I've been doing this for 20 years. What makes it particularly egregious is the premeditation, the calculation. Mrs. Haynes knew exactly what she was doing and took deliberate steps to avoid detection. Can you make charges stick? Marshall asked. With what we have? Absolutely. Multiple victims spanning decades, physical evidence, medical documentation, witness testimony. But I need to prepare you. Her lawyer is going to come at this hard. They'll claim false memories, parental alienation, coaching of the minor child. They'll paint Mrs. Haynes as the victim of a vindictive son-in-law. Let them try, Marshall said. I've got 30 years of evidence that says otherwise. Liz smiled slightly. I like you, Mr. English. You're thorough. That documentary short you put together? That's solid work. With your permission, I'd like to use portions of it in the prosecution. Whatever helps. Lenora's lawyer, a slick man named Doyle Solomon, made his first move 2 weeks after the charges were filed. He called a press conference, positioning Lenora as a grandmother torn from her family by false accusations. She played the role perfectly, tears at exactly the right moments, voice breaking with emotion, portraying herself as the victim of a cruel conspiracy. Marshall watched the coverage with Shauna, his jaw tight. She's good. She's had a lifetime to perfect the performance, Shauna said bitterly. But the next day, Rico's news outlet ran a counterstory. Interviews with Patricia Holden, Deborah Saunders, and 3 other women who'd witnessed Lenora's abuse over the years. The headline read, A History of Violence. Multiple women accuse Ohio grandmother of decades-long pattern of child abuse. The tide of public opinion began to shift. Social media lit up with people sharing their own experiences with narcissistic grandparents, abusive relatives who hid behind respectability. Emma's identity was protected, but the details of her case became a flashpoint for discussion about hidden abuse in good families. Lenora responded by giving more interviews, doubling down on her innocence. I'm being persecuted for believing in old-fashioned discipline, she told one reporter. These days, any parent who expects children to behave is called an abuser. It's political correctness run amok. But Marshall had been waiting for her to lean into that defense. He prepared something special. He released a second documentary short, this one featuring audio recordings of Lenora's interactions with Emma and Shauna. He'd been recording everything since the discovery, and the footage was damning. Lenora's cold threats, her manipulative tactics, her complete lack of empathy or remorse. It was all there, preserved on film. The recordings included the moment from the police visit when she'd said, "Children say things to get attention." Juxtaposed with Emma's tearful admission about the abuse, it was devastating. Within 48 hours, the video had 3 million views. News outlets were calling, requesting interviews. The story had gone national. Doyle Solomon called an emergency meeting. You need to stop releasing these videos, he told the prosecuting attorney. This is trial by media. You're poisoning the jury pool. Mr. English is a private citizen exercising his First Amendment rights, Liu responded. He's not part of the prosecution. We can't control what he does with his own documentary work. This is a coordinated smear campaign. This is the truth, Marshall said, speaking up for the first time. Every word, every image, every recording is authentic and documented. If the truth makes your client look bad, that's because your client is bad. Solomon's face reddened. You're going to regret this. When we get to trial, I'm going to tear apart every piece of your so-called evidence. I'm going to show that you're a manipulative father who coached his daughter, who browbeat his traumatized wife into false memories, who orchestrated this entire thing because you never liked your mother-in-law. Try it, Marshall said calmly, because I've got a dozen witnesses who never met me before this case, who have nothing to gain by lying, all telling the same story about your client. I've got medical evidence, psychological evaluations, police reports. I've got your client on tape making threats and admissions. So yeah, go ahead and try to paint me as the villain. See how that works out. After the meeting, Lou pulled Marshall aside. You're playing a dangerous game, releasing these documentaries. If this goes to trial, the defense could argue that evidence was tainted by public disclosure. It won't go to trial, Marshall said confidently. Lenora is used to bullying people in private, where she can control the narrative. But now the whole world is watching. She can't manipulate her way out of this. Eventually, she'll crack. He was right. 3 days later, Lenora gave an interview to a sympathetic talk show host, intending to rehabilitate her image. But the host, who'd done her homework, confronted Lenora with quotes from the other victims. Pressed for answers, Lenora's mask finally shattered. "Those women are liars," she screamed, no longer able to maintain the wounded grandmother persona. "They're jealous, bitter people who want attention. I did nothing wrong. I raised my daughter right, and I was trying to save my granddaughter from being ruined by her weak father." The host tried to calm her down, but Lenora was spiraling. Children need discipline. They need to be broken of their willful nature. Spare the rod, spoil the child. It's in the Bible. I did what needed to be done, and if I could do it again, I would. Marshall watched the interview with grim satisfaction. There it was, on national television, in front of millions of viewers, Lenora's true self, finally exposed. No more grandmotherly sweetness, no more martyred victim, just rage, entitlement, and a complete lack of remorse. The interview went viral. By morning, calls for Lenora's prosecution had reached a fever pitch. The prosecuting attorney's office was flooded with messages of support. Even people who'd initially sided with Lenora couldn't defend her after watching her meltdown. Solomon called Lou 2 days later. "My client wants to discuss a plea agreement." "No deals," Lou said firmly. "This is going to trial, and Mrs. Haynes is going to face the full extent of the law. She'll do that interview again, make you look like you're persecuting an old woman. Let her. Every time she opens her mouth, she convict herself further. My advice to you, counselor, is to prepare your client for prison time, because that's where she's headed." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Marshall spent that time working with Emma's therapist, ensuring his daughter understood she'd done nothing wrong, that testifying wouldn't be scary because so many people believed her and supported her. He also spent time with Shauna, who was slowly beginning to process the full scope of what had been done to her. She'd started her own therapy, dealing with decades of conditioning and abuse. Some days were better than others. Some days she could barely get out of bed, crushed by the weight of realization. But she was fighting, and that's what mattered. The preliminary hearing was standing room only, packed with reporters, advocates, and people who'd followed the story online. Emma didn't have to testify yet. The hearing was just to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Lenora sat at the defense table in a conservative dress, her hair styled, makeup carefully applied. She looked like everyone's sweet grandmother. But when Marshall entered the courtroom with Shauna and Emma, Lenora's expression flickered, just for a moment, revealing the monster beneath. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Medical evidence, photos, witness testimony from Patricia, Deborah, and 3 other women, audio recordings. The judge, an older man named Kareem Lee, listened with an increasingly grim expression. When Solomon tried to cross-examine Patricia about her grudge against Lenora, she shut him down with brutal honesty. "I have a grudge against child abusers," she said clearly. "I watched my brother's widow torture his daughter, and I failed to stop it. That's something I have to live with for the rest of my life. But I won't fail again. That woman needs to be held accountable for 30 years of violence." Judge Lee called for a recess. When he returned, his decision was swift. Marshall pulled her close. "We're all strong. Emma was strong enough to tell the truth. You were strong enough to face yours. I just did what any father would do, protected his family. Not any father, Shauna said. Some fathers look away. Some prioritize peace over protection. You didn't. You went to war for us. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marshall sat in his office and opened his laptop. He'd been thinking about what to do with all the footage, all the research, all the documentation he'd gathered during the case. It was too important to just let it sit on a hard drive. He began editing a feature-length documentary, not about Lenora specifically, but about generational abuse, about how predators hide in plain sight, about the courage it takes to break silence. Emma's story would be central, but anonymized. Other victims would be featured. The film would be a resource for survivors, a warning to abusers, a call to action for society. He called it Breaking the Cycle. When it premiered at a documentary film festival 8 months later, it won awards. More importantly, it sparked conversations. Hotlines reported increased calls from abuse survivors. Several state legislatures introduced bills strengthening child protection laws. Support groups formed. Lives changed. Marshall didn't do it for recognition. He did it because silence enabled abuse, and noise, loud, persistent, undeniable noise, could end it. 2 years after Lenora's conviction, Emma was thriving. She'd made new friends, joined a soccer team, become a vocal advocate for other kids dealing with abuse. At 8 years old, she was braver than most adults. One afternoon, she came home from school with a drawing, a family portrait showing her, Marshall, and Shauna, all smiling under a bright sun. "This is us," she said proudly. Marshall noticed someone was missing. "What about Grandma?" Emma shook her head firmly. She wasn't family. Not really. Family is people who love you and keep you safe. She just pretended. Out of the mouths of babes, Marshall thought. The simplest truth, stated plainly. That night, lying in bed with Shauna, Marshall reflected on everything they'd been through. The discovery, the investigation, the trial, the healing. It had been hell, but they'd emerged on the other side stronger, closer, free. "Do you ever regret it?" Shauna asked quietly. "Fighting so hard, making it so public, our lives will never be completely private again." Emma's story is out there, even anonymized. "Not for a second," Marshall said. "Privacy doesn't matter if you're using it to hide abuse." And Emma's story has helped other kids find the courage to speak up. That's worth any loss of privacy. My mom's appealing the sentence. Solomon says they have grounds based on media coverage prejudicing the jury. They won't win. The evidence was too strong. But even if they did, we'd just do it all over again. We know the truth now. We can't unknow it. Shauna was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I still have dreams that she's coming back. That she's in the guest house again, and Emma's scared, and I can't protect her. But then you wake up, and she's in prison, where she belongs. And Emma's safe. And we're all healing." Yeah, Shauna's hand found his in the darkness. "We're healing. Based on the evidence presented, I'm binding this case over for trial. Mrs. Haynes, you're to have no contact with the alleged victims or their family. I'm also revoking your bail. You'll be remanded into custody pending trial." Lenora's composure shattered. "You can't do this. I'm not a criminal. These are lies, all lies." "Mrs. Haynes, I've been a judge for 30 years, Lee said calmly. "I've seen a lot of cases, heard a lot of testimony. And in my professional opinion, you are one of the most dangerous people I've encountered. You're a flight risk, a potential danger to witnesses, and frankly, a menace to any child in your vicinity. So yes, I can do this, and I'm doing this." Bailiff. As Lenora was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about persecution and injustice, Marshall felt Emma's small hand slip into his. "Is it over, Daddy?" "Almost, Bug. The trial still has to happen. But we're winning. She looks so mean now. Not like Grandma at all. That's because you're finally seeing who she really is. And you never have to be afraid of her again." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Marshall had prepared a statement. "My daughter was systematically abused by someone she should have been able to trust. My wife was abused by her own mother for decades. Today's ruling brings us one step closer to justice. But more importantly, it shows that abuse doesn't get to hide behind respectability anymore. It doesn't get to hide behind family bonds or social standing. The truth matters. Children's safety matters. And people who harm children need to face consequences, regardless of who they are or how well they perform innocence. The trial happened 3 months later. Marshall had been working nonstop, helping Lee's team prepare, coordinating with witnesses, managing media coverage. He'd become an expert in his mother-in-law's crimes, able to cite dates and details of abuse spanning 4 decades. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Emma testified via closed-circuit television, her voice steady despite her fear, telling her story with heartbreaking clarity. Shauna testified about her own abuse, about the scars it left, about the years of therapy she'd need to undo the damage. Patricia, Deborah, and 5 other women testified about witnessing Lenora's abuse of various children over the years. A child psychologist explained how abusers groom their victims and silence witnesses. Dr. Reynolds presented her medical findings. The evidence was overwhelming, devastating, irrefutable. Solomon tried every trick in his playbook. He suggested Shauna's memories were false, induced by her husband's manipulation. He painted Marshall as a controlling opportunist who'd orchestrated the entire case out of spite. He claimed Emma had been coached, that the other witnesses had been paid off or were seeking attention. None of it worked. The evidence was too strong, too consistent, too well documented. Marshall's documentaries, played in court, showed Lenora in her own words admitting to hitting Emma, justifying her actions, threatening retaliation against those who spoke out. On the stand, Lenora tried to summon tears, but she couldn't maintain the mask anymore. When pressed by Lou about specific incidents, she became defensive, angry, finally shouting that she'd done nothing wrong, that children needed to be broken to be properly raised. Broken? Lou repeated. You believe children need to be broken? Disciplined? Corrected? Taught obedience? Lenora's face was red, veins standing out in her neck. Yes. Is that what you want to hear? Yes, I hit them. I used whatever was necessary to teach them how to behave. And they turned out fine. Shauna's a nurse, for God's sake. Emma would have been fine too if her father hadn't been such a weak, permissive fool. The courtroom erupted. Judge Lee called for order. Solomon looked like he wanted to disappear. Marshall squeezed Shauna's hand. She just convicted herself, he whispered. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, multiple counts of child abuse, child endangerment, assault, and terroristic threats. The verdict carried a maximum sentence of 45 years. At sentencing, Judge Lee looked at Lenora with something like pity. Mrs. Haynes, in all my years on the bench, I've never encountered someone so utterly lacking in remorse, so completely convinced of their righteousness despite overwhelming evidence of harm. You have damaged countless lives, your own daughter, your granddaughter, and who knows how many others we'll never hear from. You are a danger to society, particularly to vulnerable children. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 40 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Take her away. Lenora screamed curses as she was let out, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that she was the victim, that they'd all regret this. But Marshall felt only relief. It was finally over. 6 months later, Marshall stood in Emma's room, helping her hang drawings on the wall, bright, happy pictures she'd made in her art therapy sessions. The bruises were long healed. The nightmares were becoming less frequent. She still flinched sometimes at unexpected touches, still had moments of anxiety, but she was healing. They all were. Shauna appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready. Emma, go wash your hands. As Emma skipped past, Shauna pulled Marshall aside. Patricia called. She wanted to let us know that 2 more women have come forward with stories about Mom. Abuse from the 80s that they never reported. She's being charged with additional crimes. Good, Marshall said simply. Is that terrible of me? To be glad my mother's spending more time in prison? No, it's justice. She hurt people, and now she's facing consequences. That's how it should work. Shauna nodded, then smiled slightly. Thank you. For what? For believing Emma. For fighting when I couldn't. For not letting that monster destroy another generation of our family. For being the strong one when I was too broken to be. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trauma didn't just disappear overnight. There would be hard days, setbacks, moments of doubt and fear. But they had truth on their side. They had each other, and they had the knowledge that they'd faced evil and won. Marshall closed his eyes. Emma's drawing of their family burned into his mind. 3 figures under a bright sun, smiling, safe together. That was what mattered. That was what he'd fought for. And that was what he'd protect, always, no matter what came next. In prison, Lenora spent her days writing letters that no one answered, insisting she was innocent, that she'd been wronged. The guard said she never showed remorse, never admitted fault. She'd probably die believing she was the victim in her own story. But Marshall didn't care about Lenora's delusions anymore. She was contained, neutralized, unable to hurt anyone else. That was enough. The real victory was in the light of truth, of exposure, of justice. The light that showed monsters for what they were and protected the innocent from their shadows. Marshall English had won his war. His family was safe. His daughter was healing. His wife was reclaiming her life. And Lenora Haynes? She was exactly where she deserved to be, locked away from the world she'd poisoned, with nothing but her own twisted thoughts for company for the rest of her natural life. Justice, Marshall thought with grim satisfaction, had finally been served. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.